Today I'm talking to Pete Landrum, Beavercreek City Manager, and we're going to be asking a few questions about the earned income tax proposal that will be on the ballot. Pete, a lot of people want to know what needs funded, so can you talk about the specific infrastructure items that we need here in Beavercreek?
Yes, there's the number's been thrown around of $200 million in backlog infrastructure. That includes stormwater with streets, stormwater that is not along streets. The stormwaters, we are called Beaver Creek, so there are many creeks, and stormwater has issues of flooding backyards, erosion of land. There's also street, curbs, sidewalks, side paths, infrastructure in the city, from the city buildings to parks that have infrastructure as well. So there's a vast majority, 27.7 square miles of infrastructure in the city. Now, I believe when we talk about the $200 million of backlog, we just got an updated report of the planning for the next 25, 30 years of the projects in Beaver Creek and the region that need done. Beaver Creek's streets that need expanded over the next 25, 30 years, maximum of up to 25, 30 years. Some of it's just a couple years away, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. The total of all those projects is $181 million. I mind you that none of that is part of the $200 million of backlog projects. So it is a big number, but we are the second largest city in the region in land mass, second only to the city of Dayton.
Okay. So if I understand you correctly, what you've said is you've got $200 million in near-term backlogs that just are waiting on money, financing,
Correct.
and that future requirements down the road, 5, 10, 15
20,
years, $180 million.
$181 million in projects. The Miami Valley Regional Planning Commission does a regional approach of what projects need done in cooperation with our a thoroughfare plan that we have in place through the city. So they take the items off of that, and they take feedback from the city of expansions of roads. This is going from 2-lane roads, 4-lane roads, 3-lane roads, 5-lane roads. All those kinds of expansions that are going to be needed in the near future and in 10, 15, 20 years as well. And those projects alone are $181 million.
There are those that say, we've managed without an income tax for 40 years. Why do we need one now? So what's changed?
Beaver Creek has changed. The population has changed. The infrastructure has changed. 1980, it was farmland. What changed? 675, the growth of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, a major university on our border, 2 shopping mall areas, the Green and Fairfield Commons. Population growth from very little to now a city of 48,000. That's what's changed. And with that change, we went from 2-lane roads. I think everybody that grew up in Beaver Creek can remember back North Fairfield Road being a narrow 2-lane road. Now it's as wide as 9 lanes in certain areas along the mall area. Expansion of Shakertown, expansion of North Fairfield in all the areas. If you really think about it, the growth has caused the change of infrastructure needs. And as the city ages, what else has caused this? Age. A lot of the growth happened at the same time. And with that, once you put 30 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years of age on that, the infrastructure not only needs replaced, it needs upgraded. Just like somebody doesn't use a 40-year-old computer anymore, they upgrade it. They need bigger lanes, gutters, stormwater, and so forth. And that's what's needed with our infrastructure.
So it sounds to me like what you're saying is that the population has grown, obviously, exponentially in the past, 10 years?
Within the last 20 years. 10 years it's absolutely grown, but 20 years.
20 years.
When you're talking the growth of the city, and anybody looks statistically back, you can look at the U.S. population, and it's just grown outstanding. But it's not only been our population growth, it's been our commercial growth as well. You know, in 1992, early 90s, when the mall came in, the growth, that just started. It had already started, but that really just energized the growth of our commercial, our real estate, the commercial and retail sectors. But, you know, we have defense contractors, we have a hospital, a full-fledged hospital. All the defense contractors, business, office, retail, commercial, we have every type of business that you can think of that come in and out of Beavercreek on a daily basis, the workers for those businesses.
Okay, so residential growth, while it's been there, the big massive growth here, the number of employees that are coming in and out of Beavercreek now, and the companies that bring those employees and have offices here in the city of Beavercreek.
Yeah, you know, while we're maybe off of 48,000 residential, you know, the daytime population with the workers, there's, you know, estimates, you know, it's 23, 24, 25,000 is the estimates of the workforce of Beavercreek. So you add that to the daytime population. On top of that, you add that to the, you know, retail industry of all the people coming from outside to shop here in Beavercreek as well. So, you know, we're providing, you know, police services, we're providing snow plows, fixing potholes. We provide all those services to everybody that's within the city limits. You know, we don't, if you need police assistance, we don't ask, are you a resident first? So, you know, we provide those services to everybody within the city limits.
Okay, those near-term projects that are 200 million, I want to talk about that for a minute. Of that 200 million, can you give us a couple of the top projects that need to be done and the impact it's currently having not being done?
Some of the biggest are the stormwater, because we see flooding.
Like Factory Road?
Factory Road. You see off of Willowcrest is one, off of Grange Hall Road in Willowcrest. That's nearly a $2.5 million project right there. That is an example of, say, well, why don't you just do the project? Well, number one, I want everybody to understand, we only have about $3.6 million in capital money every year that we can spend on the capital for streets. Okay, so 3.6. Of that, about 1.6 million is funded for our repavement program every year, where we're paving roads and fixing curbs as we go. We're only able to do this year under 10 miles. We have nearly 600 miles of road, but we're only able to do 10 miles. Now think about that. So you say, okay, well, save up some money and use that 3.6 to pay that 2.5. That would be great, but you know, this stormwater project, it's not along a road. Okay, so it's not along a road. Therefore, street levies cannot be used to fund it. And people don't understand that stormwater, while when we do roads, we do put in stormwater, we require the EPA requirements, and that can fund that. As we get so many projects, most of the projects you see, Kemp Road right now, Dayton Xenia, all grant funded. I mean, we have cash matches that we have to put in as a city, but that's the only way we would be able to do those projects, those road widening projects. And with that though, like I said, if there's a stormwater as part of the road, that can be funded through street levies and grants. But number one, there is no grant funding for just stormwater, number one. And number two, like I said, for a regular stormwater project that is not connected to a street, that can't be funded with street levy dollars. That has to be funded through general fund levy, or general fund dollars, and we do not have.
Wow, that's a significant.
Same way with sidewalks, side paths. If it's part of the street, sidewalks, and it can be improved and used as considered part of the street. Which we don't have sufficient funds to even do sidewalks. So the city has not done, this is the first year, and maybe forever, that we are going to do side paths that are out by the mall that we're going to repair there in disarray. That dollar, since it's not attached to a street, it's a side path, not technically considered a sidewalk. Those that are black asphalt, those cannot be used, street dollars, cannot be used to fund those. Again, back to the general fund, which, you know, as everybody knows, has been cut significantly, and we have, that funds the general operations of the city, such as the planning department, the council, my salary, finance, HR, just the general dollars. And it's the smallest pot of money that we have of all the levies and everything combined. So when people say just use street money, it's what I'm saying is that there are a lot of infrastructure projects that street funds, street dollar levies cannot be used for. There's millions and millions of dollars of improvements, stormwater, side paths that need done as well, that you can't even begin to use street dollars. Now, on top of all that, yes, there are ones that you could use street dollars, but as again, we only have a $3.6 million a year for streets that we can use. You know, with 27.7 square miles of infrastructure, it doesn't add up. You can't compute. It doesn't, when you're looking at $3-4 million projects of Dayton Xenia right now on Kemp Road, we're looking at, because only the ability to get grant funding right now is the only way that we would be able to get that. You can't depend on grant funding in the future. Plus, we're always at the whim of waiting on getting grant approval before we can even do anything. There's so many other projects that need to happen that, you know, number one, we probably won't get a grant for. And number two, the biggest thing I want to communicate is that grant funding, while grant funding, they love to give you grant money for streets, for improvements of widening and things like that, they will not give it to you for regular maintenance. So, you know, for like sidewalk replacements, curb replacements and things like that. They look at, you know, the state and federal governments look at, hey, maintenance is supposed to be on you. We understand when you need improvements and widening and things that happen, but regular ongoing maintenance and repair and of your roads, your infrastructure is on you. So that's why there's no grants that exist for regular, what they consider routine repairs. But when you got a 30-year-old road that needs repaved, and if you wait too long, it's a simple rule. The deeper you have to go into the road to repair, the more it costs you. So if it's a blacktopping and you just go over the existing blacktop, great, that's the cheapest. But when you have to start cutting into the road with the big saws you see and make major foundational repairs, that costs you more. And then if it gets to a point where the entire base is eroded and you have to go down to dirt and redo it, costs you even 3, 4, 5 times more than just repaving.
Is it fair to say that's where we're at when it comes to the roads?
On many things it is. Okay. And again, then when we have, even though there's areas that we could do stormwater improvements with street levy money that need it, they need curbs, they need stormwater added to it, we don't have sufficient funding to do those kinds of projects. And we get complaints daily, literally, that I need my curb needs fixed, my driveway apron's crumbling, the road needs repaved, and we tell them we do not have sufficient funding, and we ask them to, we'll look at the forecast as far as our road repaving program, where they are on the list, which our engineers go through that list. People can call the engineering department and report any concerns or repairs that need be, but they can pretty well look at their road list based on the age, last time it was repaved, and the number of reports of issues, conditions. Because plainly, you know, you can have 2 roads that were repaved at the exact same year, and one be in much better condition than the other. There's a lot of factors. The quality of the asphalt that may have came from 2 different plants, and one is just wasn't as good. If one's in more shaded and wooded areas with trees, those roads do not last as long as believe it or not, as a sunny, clear road. Wow. Somehow the moisture with the trees and stuff gets into the asphalt and it degrades a lot quicker. You can tell that if you go down a road and where there's trees, pay attention, you'll see that the road is not as good of a quality. It's breaking down quicker in those shaded treed areas.
Okay. Is it fair to say that Beaver Creek is the city, and probably just outside the city, a lot of it's built on swamp land, so we get a lot of moisture, we're gonna get a lot of flooding?
There is, it was built, it's called Beaver Creek for a reason. There are issues. Now, all the development that's happened, you know, in the older developments built in the fifties and sixties, definitely pre-city time, remember city didn't come around till the 1980. You know, stormwater regulations just weren't as good back then. The requirements of the developer to do what they had to do weren't as good. So those older neighborhoods do have more issues. The newer developments that have happened from commercial to residential have strict guidelines. You know, according to our engineering, according to all EPA guidelines, the water runoff that comes off of those developments are at a slower or improved rate than before anything was done to them. Yeah. So I know we hear a lot of people say, well, ever since that new development, I'm getting water now, or water is happening to this. But that's one of the requirements of a new development, that the stormwater issues are improved, and they have to be proven. That's why you see a lot of the developments, you see the big retention or detention ponds and stuff that come with the property. That's where the water is going, and it lets it out at a slower pace than it would have if it was just regular farmland that water would have ran off of it.
Gotcha. So if we cannot get these done through an earned income tax and spread that across everyone that is using this infrastructure, taking advantage of it and the advantage of the services of the city, what is this city gonna look like in 5 years?
Well, everything's just going to continue to age. Everything's good. Projects are going to continue not to be done. I think people will get more frustrated as more levies will be brought forth. So property taxes will continue to rise. At some point in time, property taxes aren't sustainable. You got to remember too as well that the city, number one, the city is not the only one asking for property taxes. All the county agencies are asking for property taxes, the schools are asking for property taxes, the township is asking for property taxes, you know, the library is asking for property taxes, you can go on and on of all the agencies. So that's the first thing, that we're not alone asking for property taxes.
You're competing for those dollars.
We're competing for the same dollars.
Wow.
And so the issue here that we're trying to express is, let us get off of the merry-go-round of the property taxes and get onto another method of collection that will ease burden on the property owners for that. So, you know, in 5 years from now, yeah, you know, not only I wanted to go back and stress the second point that I had earlier, and that is, remember, even in 5 years, if people pass the street levies, you know, and increases, okay, and they're stressing because of additional property taxes, remember all those infrastructure things that I said can't be performed by those street levy dollars. So that infrastructure for the stormwater issues and those side paths are still going to be unfunded. And in 5 years, they're going to be broken down more flooding, more erosion of people's backyards, more erosion of creek beds, and so forth. So the issue is only going to get worse as far as our infrastructure. And number two, the property taxes, if people decide to continue to vote levies in, will also just cause, at some point, their property taxes to get higher, then cause at some point that Beaver Creek's not a desirable place to live because it's not affordable. So, you know, sure. it gets to that point where, you know, the income tax is clearly, you can be funded two different ways, and I'm sure other people will address this, but you can fund it two different ways the city can, by income tax or by property tax. There is no sales tax. It's not possible. That's a Ohio Revised Code thing. So that's a law we can't use. That's what counties use, a sales tax. But income tax and property tax, we've been funded by property tax, and that's okay when you have townships and small cities, bedroom communities like Bellbrook is another one. But compare Bellbrook and Beaver Creek together. Bellbrook is a bedroom community with hardly any business sector and very little population compared to Beavercreek. So the two are night and day when you consider that. So you start having to look at then, if it's property tax is not sustainable, what's the other method? What is the other method? And that is income tax. And our income tax code that we, council adopted about a month or two ago, back in July, basically 99.9% of it is straight out of the Ohio Revised Code. So there are no changes. You know, we determined the rate, and that was about, you know, a couple other little tweaks that we're allowed to make, and that's it. So with that, the income tax is first a person where they work, second where they live. And with when you have 22, 23, 24, maybe up to 25,000 people coming into your community every day to work, and you have businesses, you have a lot of tax exempt places in Beavercreek as well that people don't realize. People look at the hospital and think, wow, look at all those dollars they're bringing into Beavercreek. And, you know, we love sewing. The sewing's, you know, the most part of it is except a small section of one of their wings where they rent out doctor space. Other than that, it's tax exempt. So there's thousands of trips being made to sewing from people, from employees, from people visiting and that, and it's a great asset to Beavercreek, don't get me wrong. Absolutely great, want them here, but it's producing trips and wear and tear on our roads and stuff with no recourse to get funding to help with that maintenance of that. So, and that's another thing, when you think of businesses coming, people will say, we want businesses to come in, but the amount of property tax that we receive from a business that comes due to their property tax typically does not cover the number of employees that they bring into Beavercreek, of the wear and tear and more traffic on the roads, and that causes more street widening to happen, to be needed. It doesn't compute. So there is another method, and that method is the income tax, which will help non-residents that come into our city to work, to be able to help the residents offset those costs for infrastructure needs.
Okay, so if I were to sum up what you've talked about today, I walk away with three major points. First, you're restricted on how you can get funds. It has to be either an earned income tax or property taxes.
That's correct. Besides all the other local government fund and some fees, but I mean, we could maximize the fees to the top, which would not be good, and it still wouldn't be a drop in the bucket. So
and not only are you competing for grants, you're also competing for those property tax dollars.
For the levy dollars, yes.
And the third thing I walk away with is that this ever-expanding city is going to continue to grow while the infrastructure that supports it continues to degrade, and the property tax activities won't be able to keep up with it.
That is an accurate statement, and I would add to this, it is expected with the growth of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base that there will literally be potentially thousands of more jobs coming into the city of Beavercreek. And that's thousands of more cars and traffic, and potentially even more homeowners desiring to build a house or live here as well. But all that is pressure on our infrastructure, which is not sustainable with the property tax. When you have that many, because according to our statistics, and I will say this, you know, we use 75% of the workforce is outside of Beavercreek. So 75% of the workforce of Beavercreek are non-residents. The actual statistical number back from 2017, which is the latest data set we can pull, the actual number, we've been conservative with 75%. The actual number per US Census is 90%. 90% of the workforce is from outside of Beavercreek. And as they come through and they work every day in Beavercreek, and their cars wear and tear, and they at their employer, if they need police services, you know, we got them covered there. And you all the services while they're here, 40 hours or more a week, we got them covered. But they leave here, and the majority of those people leaving Beavercreek go back to a city where they pay income tax, to the home city where they live.
Got it.
We're just wanting to say, hey, when a resident goes to Dayton to work and pays the 2.5% in Dayton, we're just wanting the same thing to happen, to where if a Dayton resident comes to Beavercreek, we just want them to leave their 1% here before they go back home.
Gotcha.
It's the same process. And when you think about it, there's a reason why, we're one of 4 of over, about 250 cities that do not have a city income tax. And the other 3, including Bellbrook, are just small bedroom communities compared to us. So they just don't have the infrastructure needs that we do.
Okay. Pete, Landrum, I want to thank you for your time here and the information you provided.